tuned into another episode of Dolphins Detail. Thank you so much for joining us. It is Jake Mendel and Marek Brave, and today we are going to take the time machine. We're going to go back and look at what this franchise was, the ashes of the 2019 season, where this team rose from the grave and became a pretty fiery phoenix. But before we get into all that, Marek, the sun is shining. I know a lot of people in South Florida aren't going to care much about this talk, but you wake up in the morning, the birds are actually alive now, and it's baseball season. I know that's a pretty exciting thing for you.
Yeah, big baseball guy myself, big spring guy, summer guy. I like the nice weather. I like to be outdoors and living in the Midwest, and you can relate living up there in the Northeast. You don't get to spend a lot of time outdoors in the winter unless you like skiing or snowboarding, and I don't like that. I don't like snow. I don't like ice. I don't like wind. I don't like any of it. But spring has sprung, and we're ready for some baseball. But on this show today, we're going to talk some Miami Dolphins football like we always do, and I couldn't be more excited for that.
So let's get right into it. And Marek, the question is pretty simple. I think we came to some pretty even conclusions here, but what are Miami's five best trades since the rebuild began? I was thinking, what, circa 2019? I'd say that's the safe, the start of the Brian Flores era, where they traded off Ryan Tannehill, they traded off whatever pieces they had to wipe off the salary cap. So I thought that'd be a pretty solid place for us to start.
Yeah, I agree. You got to tear it down before you can build it back up. And Chris Greer, there's a contingent of Dolphins fans on Twitter who are not fans of Chris Greer for various reasons. But one of the things that you got to be able to give Greer his flowers for is his trading prowess. He always seems to maximize these deals and get some of the better deals that have been done over the last 5 years. And it's always fun. It's like you're a kid on Christmas morning when you log on to Twitter and you see, oh, the Dolphins have made a trade. Who'd we trade away? Who'd we trade for? It's like getting a new toy on Christmas morning. And we've been lucky enough to have a general manager who has been active in the trade market. So we do have plenty of trades to break down today on this episode.
And looking at these trades, did you play the game of life growing up at all? The board game?
Oh, heck yeah, I did.
Like you could go to college and it took a little longer for you to start making money, but then you'd start making more, or you could jump right into the workforce right away and start making money. That's kind of what Chris Greer is doing with these trades. Like he put together this entire war chest, and yes, he drafted some players, but I think the Dolphins are kind of at a point where they need those guys to be ready right now. And that's what you do. You invest that first round pick in a Bradley Chubb. You might be skipping that, developmental phase, but it's worth it in the end because you're ready to win right now. Marek, before we get into our top five, I want to mention one trade that kind of stuck out to me, made me laugh a little bit. And at the time, I think we were all pretty excited about it, or at least it piqued our interest. And that was, do you remember when the Dolphins traded Shaq Lawson to the Texans for Bernardrick McKinley and a seventh round pick?
Yeah, I was actually a big fan of that move. I thought
Same.
Bernardrick McKinney was like a tremendous linebacker. He was
Yep.
going to be the future of our linebacking core. I know our buddy Houts was super stoked on that one too. Apparently, he had wanted the Dolphins to draft McKinney the year he came out, and womp womp. It ended up being a nothing burger for both teams.
That was crazy. You get cut before week one. I think he was even like early before like he had to be cut. So it was just a strange situation. I'm going to put you on the spot. That seventh round pick in that deal, do you know who that turned into?
Yes, I do know who that turned into. That was Skylar Thompson, was it
Yep.
not?
Yep. How
Skylar
good is
Thompson,
that?
the last quarterback to start a Dolphins playoff game, or the first quarterback to start a Dolphins playoff game in what, 7 seasons, 6 seasons?
Since Matt Moore. How exciting.
Oh yes, couple of backup quarterbacks trying to take us to the promised land didn't work out.
But it's just if you word it a certain way, like, the Dolphins needed to trade Shaq Lawson to have their starting quarterback in the playoffs. That's a real weird saying, but it's true. It's
Hey,
somehow true.
that's the professional journalist coming out in you right there. I
Okay.
appreciate the phrasing.
And I can promise you, this will not be the last time the Houston Texans are brought up, but I think we're going to start with number five. I think that's how most trades go. And number five, Merrick, it is one that is just flat out breaks your brain to talk about. I mean, if you're someone who sits on Twitter, especially when it's trade season, and you saw what happened between the Miami Dolphins, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Philadelphia Eagles, your brain breaks a little bit because there was a lot of hop and skipping around. Chris Greer basically shuffled the deck when it comes to those first 12 picks of that draft. So I'm just gonna kind of try to write it out a little bit. It's gonna be tough. Everyone's gonna lose it, but hey, Google it, I guess. So San Francisco acquired the number 3 pick in the 2021 NFL draft from the Dolphins, who then traded up from that number 12 pick they got from San Francisco. They flopped that with the Eagles, getting their 6, and that turned into Jalen Waddle. So basically, they moved back and they got 2 first round picks for that. However, they were sitting at 12 and they decided our guy might not be there, right? We still want to make sure we get our guy. So Greer decided I'm going to have my cake and eat it too. So instead of moving back to 12 and getting 2 first round picks, it was basically I moved back to 6. I got 1 first round pick and Jalen Waddle. In that deal, I mean, Trey Lance going to the San Francisco 49ers, that's worked out pretty well for us. And on top of that, Eagles drafted Devonta Smith, and he's been an absolute stud too. It does seem like the Dolphins could have gone either way. But I mean, Marek, to add Jalen Waddle to this team, you saw the connection he has with Tua. This was a deal that, wheeling and dealing Chris Greer, this was kind of spot on for what he was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, funny thing about that trade, I actually used to co-host an ESPN radio show here in Iowa where I live, and that trade, both of those trades actually went down while I was on the air with my team
Oh,
there,
no.
and they're all looking at me like, "Oh, you're the Dolphins guy. Break down these moves." And I'm like, "I don't even know what these moves are," because we were moving back and then jumping up and trading away this pick, but acquiring that pick, and who are we targeting? And I don't know. And it was just a crazy time for all Dolphins fans trying to figure out exactly what was going on. But I really liked that deal from Chris Greer because I don't think you make that second deal so soon if you didn't have them both worked out before he made the
Exactly.
first deal. So that's kind of like me in fantasy football where I'm trying to think 2 or 3 steps ahead of everybody else. I'm like, all right, if I get this guy, then I can, trade him to this other team. And then when I get that guy, I can trade him to this other team to get the player I actually want. And it kind of felt like Chris Greer was kind of on that same vibe there. And to get Jalen Waddle in the deal was a great pick. I used to write for the Left Arm of God when it first started. That's Houtz's secondary website that he used to write dedicated to Tua Tagovailoa. And I did a mock draft, and I was taking Jalen Waddle uh, at 3 sometimes because I just liked Jalen Waddle's skill set. I liked the fact that he played college ball with Tua Tagovailoa. I thought that was going to be a good move for the Dolphins to make. So I think a lot of fans at the time were kind of upset that the Dolphins went from 12 back up to 6, giving away that first round pick to do so. They were really happy with the first trade, but they thought, hey, if you were going to make that deal and miss out on these players, you might as well keep these first round picks. But I actually loved the deal because it allowed them to go back up and get Jalen Waddle. And so you look back at the guys that they missed on, they missed out on Jamar Chase, who went uh, before the Dolphins were able to pick at 6, and they
Right
missed
at
out
5, I
on
think, right? I
and
think I
they
could be
missed
wrong.
the Bengals took him early to reunite him with his college quarterback Joe Burrow, and then the Falcons took Kyle Pitts. So Jamar Chase has been a home run pick for the Bengals, but I can't really say the same for Kyle Pitts. So would Jamar Chase be as successful in the Miami Dolphins offense? It's a different kind of offense. He has a different kind of skill set than Jalen Waddle has. You don't know. Certainly under Brian Flores, he wouldn't have been as successful. I don't think anybody was going to be successful in that offense. And would Kyle Pitts have been the guy for the Dolphins at the tight end room? Again, that's kind of up in the air. He had a really down year last year, hasn't really lived up to his draft stock. But Jalen Waddle comes in. He immediately, I think, set or came close to did he set the single season record for receptions for the Dolphins in his rookie year? He at least
Yeah.
set the rookie record for receptions in the entire NFL, not just for the Dolphins. And then turns around and has a fantastic year last year as well, playing that 1B receiver role behind Tyreek Hill. And you look at Waddle now, and you're thinking, like, this guy is the future of that Dolphins wide receiver room alongside Tyreek Hill for many, many years to come. So when you look at that trade, trading back from number 3 to number 12, and then trading another first round pick to jump back up to number 6, I don't think Chris Greer could have played that any better. I'm really happy with Jalen Waddle and the way that one turned out. How about you, Jake?
And it's kind of interesting. You brought up the fact that he had a plan in place, right? And here comes the spin zone. Here comes me going a full blown homer, but nobody can predict the future. If you find someone that does, make sure you let them know to give me their gambling picks. But until that day, we do not know what's going to happen in the future. So Chris Greer took a calculated risk here. And when you look what the Dolphins are dealing with now, I mean, 4 picks, they're very tight on cap space. That kind of eases that queasiness. I'm going to go ahead and say that a little bit just for the sake of he has a plan. Like he knows he can work in these situations. He knows how to get things done. And to me, that's almost as big as just getting the trade done, knowing you have someone in place who has a few strings they can pull at different times. And just to kind of talk about Jalen Waddle for a minute, I mean, he led the league this year in yards per reception. He was just devastating opponents over the middle of the field. That Green Bay Packers game is one that I really want to get out of my head. But I mean, that play he had where he caught the ball going over the middle, turned up that right sideline and was gone. I mean, that was so cool to see because that was I wouldn't say the first, but that was just such a great image of how quick he is and how quickly he can escape opposing defenses. And, there are still situations where we can ask for more from Jalen Waddle. I remember the Vikings game where he's sitting there with a towel over his head when he dropped the ball, and that had a face of someone who's about to go scorched earth over someone. He had a couple drops, but I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is Jalen Waddle was awesome. I think there's still another level he can go. And while we can kind of say, would have Devonta Smith been better? Would have Kyle Pitts been better? Would have Jamar Chase been better? Sure, that dialogue we can definitely have. But for right now, I think you're happy with whoever you have because the trajectory, all of them are still going up, up, up.
Yep, I couldn't agree with you more. Really, really happy with what we've gotten from Jalen Waddle, and I think he's going to continue to grow and get better as the years go on. And that'll be a home run pick when we look back on the history of this franchise.
Moving to the next one, number 4, Russell Wilson said Broncos country, let's ride. Bradley Chubb said no. I don't want it. Bradley
Get
Chubb
me out of there.
escaped the sinking Broncos with a trade to the Miami Dolphins. This one, everyone is starting to feel a little differently now, just for the sake of Miami does not have a first round pick this year. And there's two things you can blame for that: the Bradley Chubb trade and, Stephen Ross being Stephen Ross. But something that Chris Greer did say while Mike McDaniel joked that he hasn't had a first round pick, the Dolphins have gotten some pretty great studs in return at different positions. And this is the one that I really want to focus in on in terms of, playing that game of life, right? The idea of you can develop someone, you can bring someone in and you can get there, or you can have it right now. What you're getting with Bradley Chubb is a 26-year-old who's ready to play, someone who has had success in this league. And I think we've spoken about this before. I mean, everyone praised the Buffalo Bills for signing Von Miller. And don't get me wrong, Von Miller is a stud. He's a two-time Super Bowl winner, I'm pretty sure. Great leader in the locker room. But if you had to decide to give a 4-year, 5-year contract based on what someone's going to do, not what they've done, and you have Bradley Chubb at 26 years old or Von Miller at 33, 34, I mean, Bradley Chubb seems like a knockout pick. He's young. He's ready to go. You have Jalen Phillips there. You even saw him. I mean, Jalen Phillips in his rookie year, he got really hot near the end of the year. He still needed time to figure things out. I don't know if the Dolphins really, I guess the Dolphins have the luxury of they don't need to wait. They have that money, they have that cap space, those draft picks to go out and get Bradley Chubb. And I think it's important to keep in mind he was spending a little bit of the season, end of the season, playing with a club on his hands. So I think that impacted things. But overall, I see the vision. I see what you can accomplish with Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips across from each other. And overall, I'm 100% okay with it.
Yeah, I am as well. Fun fact: I was actually at Bradley Chubb's first game as a Miami
Oh,
Dolphin.
very
That
nice.
that was in Chicago against the Bears last year, and he showed his leadership right away. He led the defense out of the tunnel to begin that game. So I thought that was a fun little tidbit, showing his leadership skills there. But also, you got to remember pass rusher is a premier position in the NFL. Like these are the players that get drafted high. These are the players that you swing for the fences to try and acquire to get on your team. So the Dolphins could have kept that first round draft pick that they traded to get Bradley Chubb, but you weren't going to get a pass rusher the quality of Bradley Chubb with that selection. I can't remember if they traded the pick that would have been like 21 or 22, or if they traded the later pick that they got from the San Francisco 49ers for Chubb. But either way, whether it's the early 20s or the late 20s, you are not getting a pass rusher of Bradley Chubb's caliber at that spot. You're just not going to get that. So to trade that pick away, to have the foresight to trade that pick away, knowing it was going to be a late first round selection for a premier pass rusher like Bradley Chubb, you mentioned, only 26 years old, also has familiarity with our new defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, played in his scheme and was very successful in his scheme. Now, some wonder if we got ourselves a dented can because Bradley Chubb has suffered quite a few injuries in his career so far and was injured for the Miami Dolphins late into last year. But that's how this game works. Football is a violent game. Players get injured. Everyone's either not injured until they are or injury prone until they're not. So let's hope that Bradley Chubb has gotten these injuries behind him. He can, you know, go into 2023 on one side with Jalen Phillips on the other, and the Dolphins can have, two of the best young pass rushers in the NFL on this defense led by Vic Fangio.
Jalen Phillips coming out. I mean, he retired from football because he had concussion issues. Everybody thought he was another injury prone guy. That's why he fell in the draft. I mean, if he didn't have those issues, I think a lot of draft gurus would agree he's a top 5 pick. And the Dolphins decided to take that swing. And so far, it's looked great at what was it, pick number 19, 18, somewhere in there.
Something like that.
I see that 15 going up in the rafters one day. I joke about that a little bit, but you just kind of see the trajectory and how things are going. And I just don't know if the Dolphins defense would have been better off if they drafted someone and then you got to give him 70, 80% of the snaps to let him grow. And then he's going to make mistakes and you got to work through all that. I just think when you look at the big picture, the Dolphins had the money to take a risk. They had the draft capital. Take every shot you
And
can.
and they're all in right now. The Dolphins are all in.
Exactly.
If they didn't signify that to you with the trade of Tyreek Hill in the offseason before last year, then certainly that trade for Bradley Chubb, sending another first round pick away to acquire that young pass rusher, that signifies to everyone that the Miami Dolphins are all in right now. They're trying to win a Super Bowl right now while they have a rookie quarterback who performed really, really well last year when healthy, when they have him on that rookie deal and it's cheap talent. They can surround him with the expensive pieces that can help prop him up and hopefully fingers crossed, oh my god, it'd be music to our ears, deliver a Lombardi trophy to the Miami Dolphins.
I really hope I don't have to keep playing this back as the clip that jinxed us for the rest of time. Before we get off this, Merrick, something I think that's interesting to talk about, and we're getting a little wacky with this one, let me say, but Bradley Chubb, the Dolphins trade for him, and then Vic Fangio comes in, his former head coach. Things would make a lot of sense if Vic Fangio came in and then was like, "We got to get Bradley Chubb. I know what he's like." But for things to happen the other way, that's a pretty unique, pretty weird situation that kind of makes you go, just a little bit.
Yeah, little tinfoil hat. You wonder if
Exactly.
maybe the Dolphins knew that they might be getting themselves some Vic Fangio at the end of last season. They knew he was going to come on down to South Florida after taking a 1-year sabbatical. You never know.
Of course, it could be as simple as Bradley Chubb was the best pass rusher available, and it just happened to fall that way. But you got to wipe the dust off the tinfoil hat once in a while. Moving on, number 3. This one is a little interesting. I wasn't entirely sure to where to place this because Jalen Ramsey, he requests that trade to South Florida to join the Miami Dolphins. As a result, Miami only has to give up Hunter Long and a third-round pick to acquire a 3-time All-Pro, a 6-time Pro Bowler, a cornerback that is in a linebacker's body who's going to hit you and make you feel it. Merrick, I only put this at 3 because we want to base these trades on what you're going to do, not what you've already done. But overall, man, this is another situation. Chris Greer had the draft capital. Guys want to play in Miami, breaking news. And all of a sudden, you're cooking with Crisco. And here's Jalen Ramsey sitting in Miami wearing a Dolphins jersey.
Yeah, and he's at this trade is at number 3 right now, and who knows? This could vault up the list based on how he performs in that aqua and orange for the Dolphins this season and beyond. But to be able to get a player of Jalen Ramsey's caliber for a third round pick and then Hunter Long, who literally caught one more pass for the Miami Dolphins than you or I did during his entire career with the Dolphins,
Wild.
that's insanity. So again, we talked about this last week. You can plug that trade into Madden over and over again, and it's just going to keep getting rejected. But Chris Greer, he took out the magic wand, waved it around, and voila, Jalen Ramsey, 3-time All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler. I think that's right, 5 or 6-time Pro Bowler,
Yep, 6.
coming to the Miami Dolphins to man the opposite cornerback position from Xavier Howard on the other side. Like, this should be a great defense this upcoming season. This should be the best cornerback tandem in the NFL, and I'm excited to watch it happen. Jalen Ramsey has been one of my favorite personalities in the league since he entered. I love his confidence. I love his swagger. I love, his trash talking ability. He's going to get inside the heads of opposing wide receivers. And it should be a fun thing for the Dolphins, a fun thing for us to talk about as the season progresses. But this sits at number 3 now. Who knows where it'll be after this season's over?
And I'm gonna say let's say it doesn't work out, right? Let's say that he's a step slow and things kind of deteriorate over the next 2 years, and you're just kind of paying for him. He starts, but he's not that player. You gave up Hunter Long in a third round pick. The risk was absolutely worth it, no matter what happens moving forward. We say it about players, the best ability is availability. It's true for franchises too. The Dolphins took a calculated risk, and I really like this.
Yeah, and like you said, those are the moves you have to make. Again, another trade signifying that the Dolphins are all in. They want to maximize this 2-year window while Tua is still on that rookie contract. They want to try to bring a Lombardi Trophy to South Florida, and this is another way to do it. And I think the fact that Jalen Ramsey wanted to be on the Miami Dolphins kind of speaks volumes of how far this team has come since that rebuild started, 4 years
Yep.
ago. The fact that he wants to come to Miami, he wants to play for Vic Fangio, he wants to play opposite Xavier Howard, he wants to play, on a team that has players like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and Tua Tagovailoa. Like, Chris Greer has been putting in that work, and this team has gotten significantly better over the last 4 seasons. And we, as Dolphins fans, are going to be, the beneficiaries of that work.
Marek, I got some breaking news for you. Tyreek Hill is like the rest of us and actually prefers Miami over New York. I don't know if that's too breaking of news, but hey, that's what I got for you. This trade, I mean, we're a year into it, right? There's a long way to go. I think we just actually passed the 1 year anniversary, but I have such a hard time seeing how this trade isn't a great one for the Miami Dolphins. And that doesn't mean Kansas City isn't getting a great return for it too, because this is a trade where the Dolphins sent a 2022 first rounder and a 2022 second rounder, 2 fourth round picks, and a 6th round pick to the Kansas City Chiefs for Tyreek Hill. If Tua's healthy all year, that's a big if, and everything can happen in football. Tyreek Hill is right up there with Justin Jefferson as the offensive player in the year. The way those two were racing each other in terms of just receptions, yards, touchdowns was so much fun to watch. And, something I didn't realize I'd like as much until it happened. Seeing him throw up that peace sign in aqua orange, man, oh man, that felt me. That hit me deep. It felt so awesome.
I really like that you brought up how him and Justin Jefferson were both having great seasons, because guess who had them both on their fantasy team? It
Look
was
at
this
you.
guy over here. I did win the championship. All right, I've already brought up my fantasy team twice on this episode. I know how taboo that is, so I'll stop. But man, that trade is just mind blowing to me. I remember. Many years ago, you probably would have been in high school when it went down, or uh, shortly after you graduated. But do you remember when the Dolphins traded for Brandon Marshall? I think
That was before. That was what year? 2010
I can't
ish.
remember the exact year. In my head, I'm like, oh, that was probably like 10 years ago. But honestly, it was probably, yeah, it was significantly, yeah, it's probably more like 13 or 14 years ago at this
Sophomore in high
point.
school. Potato,
But
potato.
so it felt like that, but on steroids, because I was so jazzed when the Tyreek Hill trade went down. He is just he's an animal. He's a cheetah. He's the fastest receiver in the league. He comes from an organization like the Kansas City Chiefs, a winning organization. He knows what it feels like to be a Super Bowl champion. We talked about it with Jalen Ramsey, but he comes to the Dolphins with that confidence, with that swagger. He brings that with him. He invigorates the rest of that team. He brings them up to his level, and encourages them to be more like him. And he doesn't just talk about it, he does the work. He is about it. He works harder than almost anybody else on that squad, and again, it encourages the rest of his teammates to want to be like that. Tyreek Hill is a Miami Dolphin, and we are all better for it. What a fantastic trade that was.
And I think, I mean, you kind of just touched on it, but I mean, the leadership. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention, but I was. There was so many, conversations about he's going to Miami to retire, right? Another diva wide receiver gets his way, that type of thing. The leadership Tyreek Hill has displayed since he joined the Miami Dolphins has just been so impressive to kind of see unfold. As he's like the oldest guy on this team. Marek, I think there's one guy over 30 on this entire roster. It's just the fact the Dolphins are still there is kind of crazy. And the fact that you can have guys like Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb, even Jalen Ramsey, another one, these guys can come in and be leaders, and you already have somehow a culture in place without leaders. That to me, it was just so strange. But to see all the pieces come together, I mean, Tyreek Hill's the biggest one in my mind, and he's been the perfect fit.
Yeah, and you talked about it, and we talked about it with Jalen Ramsey. He chose the Dolphins over the Jets. He
Yep.
chose to come to Miami over, going to New York, and at the time playing with Zach Wilson. And he has said in multiple interviews since then that he chose the Dolphins because he thought that they were in a better position to win now. He likes the weather, obviously. Can't do anything about that. Of course, somebody wants to live in sunny South Florida and go to the beach every day, outside of living in cold, snowy New York. Um, you know, Taxes probably played a part in it as well. No state
I would
income
say so.
tax in Miami, but hey, we'll take whatever advantage we can get as fans of this squad. So Tyreek Hill choosing the Dolphins over the Jets, I think he made a great choice, and hopefully players can continue to make that same choice going forward if they're faced with it.
As we're starting to wind down here, I mean, there's just one thing I still, I mean, not that trade the Dolphins did with San Francisco and the Eagles. That's not really what's boggling my mind about everything the Dolphins done. I mean, it just really goes back to how much did the Dolphins get for Laramie Tunstall again? This is the trade that started everything. It was so much fun to listen all offseason to Chris Greer say, "We're not trading Laramie Tunstall. We're not trading Laramie Tunstall." And everyone wanted to be like, "Oh, he was lying. He was lying." Until you hear the Dolphins received a 2020 first round pick, a 2021 first round pick, a 2021 second round pick, and tackled Julian Davenport to the Houston Texans for Laramie Tunstall, Kenny Stills, 2020 fourth round pick, and a 2021 sixth round pick. Oh my God, man. That is really the foundation of this entire roster.
Yeah, this I mean, people joke about it on Twitter all the time. You got to build a statue to Laramie Tunsil outside of Hard Rock Stadium because this was the catalyst. This was the beginning of it all. This was the beginning of the Miami Dolphins rebuild, and there it is. There it
A
is. You
legend
got it.
himself.
You got it right there. Look at him, looking a little portly. You know what? We love you. We love you, Tunsil. You can come on back home whenever you're ready too. I know he just signed a big extension with the Texans, but my favorite part of that trade was I remember when it went down, there was a part of me that was like kind of sad about it,
Mhm.
and then immediately after you get the compensation that the Dolphins got for trading Tunsil, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I can see why they did that." And then Laramie Tunsil had the same reaction. He was kind of sad he was traded away from the Dolphins, and then he found out what the Texans gave up to get him, and he goes, "Hell, I would have traded me for that too." So I loved that reaction from Tunsil, and Mr. Tunsil, we bow to you. We thank you so much for changing the course, the trajectory of this franchise over the last 4 seasons. It all began with you, big man. It all began with you, and the Dolphins continue to reap the benefits of that trade. I think you have a list there, Jake. You were letting me
Oh,
know in the DMs earlier. Everyone that has been acquired with the picks, which were then traded for more picks and more picks and more picks. These picks just kept multiplying like rabbits out here, and the players, the names that you can list off that were acquired because of the Tunsil deal, they're just it goes on and on. Why don't you give the people, let them know?
I have a hard time even comprehending this. This legend, the legend of Laramie Tunsil, this man just signed a massive extension with the Houston Texans. There's a little part of me that says when he retires, the Miami Dolphins will ask him, "Do you want to retire in a Dolphins jersey?" And he'd say yes. I think
One
he
day
would say yes.
contract.
He deserves a spot in the front office because of Laramie Tunsil. The Dolphins got Julian Davenport, cornerback Noah Igbenogany, wide receiver Jalen Waddle, safety Javon Holland, wide receiver Tyreek Hill, linebacker Channing Tindall, wide receiver Eric Ezukama, linebacker Bradley Chubb, and there is still one more player to be named
There's
later as a
still one more player to pick.
2025 fifth round pick. So, oh my God, when you think about that, you think about the Dolphins were looking like in 2019 going to that season. You're like, all right, you got your foundational pieces. You do have, Tunstall, Gesicki's turning into his own. Fitzpatrick's kind of fun. But man, you look at the Dolphins roster right now, outside of Tyreek Hill, do you think anybody would be worth 2 first round picks? I mean, Tyreek Hill, you didn't even get 2 first round picks for.
Yeah, no. And when you name off those players, take the draft picks out of the equation, would anybody in their right mind trade Laramie Tunstall for Jalen Waddle, Javon Holland, Tyreek Hill, and Bradley Chubb? No, you couldn't find a GM in the league that would do that trade straight up. Tunsil for Waddle, Holland, Chubb, and Hill. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. But Chris Greer, again, waved the magic wand, sprinkled some fairy dust on all this, and he made it happen. He traded Laramie Tunsil, a great player, a very, 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 very good top 3 left tackle in the NFL. He traded him away, which, by the way, we got that left tackle position finally figured out by bringing in Teron Armstead last year. He played great. Hopefully, he can continue to do so going forward. But you trade away a great left tackle, but you find yourself with 2 great wide receivers, a great pass rusher, and a great safety who probably hasn't even played his best football yet. Oh, and you still have players like Channing Tindall who could blossom this year, Eric Ezukama, who will see more playing time this year and might blossom as well. You still got a 4th round draft pick going forward, and then you can toss out the other guys, Julian Davenport, Johnson Batamosi, and what was the last one? There was one more. Noah
No,
Igbenogany. Somehow I remembered all of them. I don't know how that worked, but throw those guys out, and you just pick the 4 superstars the Dolphins got because of that trade in Waddle, Hill, Chubb, and Javon Holland, and it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal deal. It might
and
be the best trade in NFL history when you break it down like that.
it's got to. I mean, it's got to be close. I mean, if the Dolphins win a Super Bowl, that I think that's where that dialogue really
Oh, of
starts.
course. Yeah, I think the only other trade that people are probably screaming at their listening devices right now is the Herschel Walker deal that netted the Cowboys Aikman and Emmett Smith and got them a couple Super Bowls. So, but hey, maybe we'll grab a couple starting this year.
And to kind of bring it back to being just a complete homer and thinking, hey, Chris Greer isn't that terrible. This trade's different than all the others. This is a situation where Chris Greer knew where that team was. The other 4 trades we listed, Miami was acquiring players. Weirdly enough, acquiring players from this specific trade. So to me, that just kind of goes back to the point of we look at the Dolphins now. We look at they have their top tier talent. They're starting to fill out the depth. But when you have just the 4 draft picks and you have limited cap space, having someone who understands the roster, where you are, what your need, what your wants are, down to a T is so important. And despite the fact that Miami's offensive line was terrible without Laramie Tunstall, it was terrible with Laramie Tunstall too. So he knew that this was going to be a big bullet to bite. Julian Davenport got kind of worked over there on the left side when he did have to play. Yes, he was a decent, spot starter, that type of thing. Not the same level of players. So he was willing to take that sacrifice. And I think the team, I mean, it was 1,000% worth it. And I think you make it even if, you got 9 Noah Igbenogany's out of it. I just still think the value, the opportunity is something you will never, ever, ever want to pass up.
Yep, and we just ran down 5 trades that Chris Greer has made over the last few years, and maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but I'd say Chris Greer's best trade is maybe a trade he hasn't even made yet. Maybe he'll be able to top all of these trades in the near future.
Let us know what you think that trade might be. Share us your wacky thoughts. Are there any trades we missed? Because go back to that 2019, 2020 era. There are some very weird trades the Dolphins just make. Bernard McKinley is one we brought up. But that is it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on Dolphins Detail. Like I said, let us know what you think. If you're joining the show, hit that subscribe button. But until then, we'll talk to you next time.